the big games? Are you ready to be Dan the Man? Oh. Yeah. No. More like this. Yeah!
Oh.
This?
Game.
How about that?
Movie.
This?
Game.
Yeah! Want to rent the latest in video games? With an adult Blockbuster membership, you can rent Pokemon Gold and Silver with an E rating. Blockbuster. Are you game enough?
Imagine being a Japanese game dev, slaving away 4 years on a game, working on other projects, dealing with design and philosophy changes, just to have this guy advertise your game. Y2K times were wild. Hi there, if we've never met before, my name's Vanilla, and if we haven't before, welcome back. This is a special episode for me and the lore of this channel because this video is going to touch on a monumentous part of my history as a content creator. We are finally returning to the story of Space World 97. That's right, get out the confetti and someone order a pie from Costco, we're throwing a party. Now, if you are new to this channel or you don't know much about me, then this may be kind of confusing to you, but many moons ago, I created a video about Space World 97. That video is an absolute masterpiece and you should totally check it out, by the way. But anyway, you may be asking yourself, what is Space World 97? Why do I care? I'm here to watch a video about a ROM hack. Well, Space World 97 is the reason Super Gold 97, the ROM hack I'll be talking about in this video, even exists. The gold and silver we know and kind of love weren't actually the first iteration of the games. Due to a lot of different factors, some of which we're not entirely sure of, the original design of gold and silver were scrapped. You would have been able to play a variation of these versions of the games if you attended Space World 97, and thanks to some data leaks in 2018, the world was reintroduced to these demos and we're actually able to play the exact same version of the game that was originally at the event. Beta, gold, and silver, if you will. My other video on Space World 97 goes much more in depth about the gameplay differences between the beta and the final release, and there are quite a few, but since the beta debuted at the Space World 97 convention, we can assume the display for the attendees was kept relatively bare bones so they wouldn't spend too long at the display cabinets where you could play the demo. The demo made it so you couldn't choose the name of your character or your rival. All there really was to do was to pick your starter and roam around for a bit. You can't use the PC or the Pokemon Center either, but one of the most important things that you would have been able to see is that the starters are different. And you know what? I think I like these starters better. I'm sorry. I really like Hodoguma and Kurusu more than Totodile and Cyndaquil. Super World gives these two new starters the names Palseo and Covern. Chikorita is the same though, which I love, although something happens in its middle stage and I'm not sure I'm a huge fan of that. What gameplay was visible and playable at Space World 97 wasn't the only game data that existed for the beta versions of the games, and that's kind of where things get a little bit odd. There were a lot of design decisions that are different between the beta and the final release, and it's not just Pokemon. I feel like that's what a lot of folks know the beta for, is the unreleased Pokemon, but for me personally, I'm more offended that they left out the skateboard. There's no reason why that needed to be left out. Imagine how cool it would have been to travel through Johto on a skateboard. You can do that in Super Gold and it's amazing. But honestly, the beta Pokemon designs and concepts are really cool, and I'm not sure why they decided to leave out a lot of the designs that they did. There are Pokemon like Kotora and Raitora, as well as Urufumon and Warurufu that look perfect. My assumption is maybe since the map designs were a lot different, that there wasn't a really good place to put some of them. Urufumon and Warurufu are dark ice types, and in the final release of Johto, I don't know if there were a lot of good places to find ice types. That's a huge difference as well, the map design. Most, if not all, of these locations in the beta look nothing like any of the locations in the final release. Honestly, maybe I'm just a bit biased. I think I like the designs of the beta a lot more. I like the color choice for the towns, and their designs really remind me of Gen 1, which I'm a huge fan of. I really like the old art design of Pokemon, from the world to the Pokemon themselves, even though I'm a much bigger fan of modern generations, specifically Gen 9. Maybe you're asking at this point, why did they change so much? There aren't many solid answers that I could find. Nintendo's former president, Iwata Satoru, did an interview with Morimoto Shigeki, who's one of the lead developers of the Pokemon franchise. The interview cites the sheer amount of stuff going on with the Pokemon franchise at the time as the main reason for the delays, as well as the fact that there were only around 4 programmers on the team for Gold and Silver. Apparently getting Red and Blue ready to launch overseas took a lot of resources, and development for Pokemon Stadium was also in progress. And there were complications there too, because apparently Stadium was supposed to be a 64DD title. What does that even mean, Vanilla? I don't know what that is. The 64DD was an add-on for the N64 that was more or less a disk drive that allowed for games to have a bit more space to work with for developers. It makes a lot of sense why the developers would have wanted to use this feature for Pokemon Stadium, but since they were also working on Gold and Silver at the time, 64DD compatibility was scrapped and Stadium was also delayed. Thankfully for all of us, an anonymous user leaked the data for the Space World 97 Gold and Silver beta, and that's how projects like Super Gold 97 were able to be created. Honestly, I think it's really cool to get to play a project that explores what Pokemon Gold and Silver could have been like if Pokemon continued development in the direction of the beta. The creator of Super Gold Gold Level 3 really made sure to adhere to the information provided in the leaks in order to make an accurate depiction. And honestly, if this is as far as you make it into the video, I really suggest that you go download Super Gold, if not just to see what the differences are. The beta starters are totally worth it on their own, but in the first couple of areas, you get to see both the beta world layout and Pokemon as well, so you can really see what kind of changes were made to the gameplay. I do have to say that if you end up wanting to play this in the long run, I highly suggest picking up the guide for the game since it does have so many changes. There's this huge PDF that you can get that's formatted like the old Prima guides back in the day, and I was glued to it the entire time I was playing. It's super useful. Unfortunately, I believe it can only be found on the Super Gold Discord server, so you will probably have to join that in order to download it. I'll leave a link to the Poke community thread so you can head on over there and check it out for yourself. Okay, let's get to the hack. So when you first boot up the hack, you get to see what the original title screen was supposed to be. When you play the beta, there's zero difference between Gold and Silver except for the title saying Gold or Silver. There's no Lugia, it's just Ho-Oh for both games, which makes sense since there was no data for Lugia in the beta. Fun fact, Lugia wasn't originally designed for the games, but was specifically made for the Pokemon movie 2000, which was released in 1999, which isn't confusing or anything. To this date, Lugia is the only Pokemon that was designed by the Pokemon anime team, not the Pokemon design team. So when we begin our Super Gold adventure, Professor Oak welcomes us to the Nihon region. Nihon means Japan in Japanese. And if I had to guess, it's based on the idea that Johto was supposed to be based on the entirety of Japan as opposed to a specific region. If we rotate the Pokegear map from the beta, you can kind of see the resemblance between it and Japan. For a lot of my research on the beta, I've been using a website called the Cutting Room Floor, which has a really comprehensive record of pretty much every single piece of data you could think of. Super Gold leans really heavily into the region being based on Japan, which gives the game a very distinct style. Most, if not all, of the gym leaders have custom sprites that weren't included in either the beta or the final release, and they match the vibe of the region really well. I specifically like the design of Faulkner and Jasmine the best, although I appreciated the changes made to certain gym leaders like Bugsy, who actually looks like a grown adult rather than an elementary school student who somehow became a gym leader. In the Nihon region, Bugsy is a respected researcher and he definitely looks the part. As I was going through the game, that's something that really caught my attention. Even though the dialogue wasn't lengthy, I feel like care was put into adding some more substance to the world. Characters give more information to you and their dialogue really contributes more to the theme of the games. In the final release of Gold and Silver, I really never felt like Oak or Elm did or said anything to us, and we really never got to know who they were. But in this game, Oak plays a huge part in Super Gold as well as our rival Silver. I feel like that was missing in the earlier generations of Pokemon, and it's honestly my favorite part of the newer generations. But Super Gold kind of adds that in a Gen 2 sort of way. While the final release of Gen 2 also highlight these themes, Super Gold really leaned heavily into the idea that Pokemon are friends and not tools to achieve your personal goals. This is really apparent with our rival, and thankfully Silver's character was changed substantially. I'm someone who wasn't a huge fan of the earlier rivals like Silver or Blue because they were extremely selfish and only cared about being the strongest trainers on the planet. Like, personal ambition is one thing, but straight up insulting your Pokemon for being too weak? No thank you. I'm not a huge fan of self-absorbed, borderline sociopathic tryhards. You can miss me with all of that. In Super Gold, Silver isn't a pushover though. He's strong and wants to be stronger. He still has that drive to be the best, but it's not at the expense of everyone around him. He reminds me a lot of Barry from Gen 4 minus the major ADHD energy. Silver sees us as a rival, but also as someone who's going on an adventure alongside him. He notices us growing as both a trainer and a person alongside him and doesn't become jealous or spiteful. Good rival, easy 9 out of 10, especially since he plays an important role in the story. Speaking of story, there's a new one in Super Gold, even though the basic premise is still the same. Professor Oak wants us to go out and fill up his Pokedex for him. That's something we're all used to. But Team Rocket is back for real this time in Nihon, and they're not messing around. They have an evil mind control machine that they want to use on Pokemon, and they're pulling out all the stops to make sure that they're able to achieve their goals. I usually like evil organizations that don't take themselves too seriously, but it was kind of nice to see a somewhat competent big bad. Not in a we're going to destroy the universe and take all of you with us kind of way. These are your kind of old school bad guys, medium stakes, enough to make you say, hey, we should definitely stop them, but not, oh my god, we're gonna die if we don't. This story carries you basically until the Elite Four, and then it's pretty much over, and you're back to having being the strongest trainer as your driving force to move forward. Not like there's anything wrong with that, especially since we're talking about a genuine Gen 2 experience. So needless to say, I think that the story of this hack is a substantial improvement from the final releases. But what about the gameplay? That's probably something I should get around to talking about, huh? I think the best way to describe it is that it's a true, genuine Gen 2 experience. This hack really tries its best to adhere to the core gameplay loop, and if you like that about Gold and Silver, you're going to love Super Gold, and that's great. However, if you're me, you're not the biggest fan of that kind of gameplay. The level curve in Gen 2 always confused me, and after playing this hack, I'm still confused and distressed. I spent literally forever grinding for XP, hours and hours of grinding for peanuts. By the time I got to like the 5th gym, I was fed up. I wasn't even trying to overlevel or anything. After all the grinding, my aces were usually at least 5 levels beneath whatever key NPC I was battling. I guess you can say that's where the challenge comes in, but if you should know anything about me, I'm not the biggest fan of forced challenges. I get that team building and all that is important, but we're talking about Gen 2 movesets and extremely limited access to TMs, and when the XP curve is basically a flat line, my patience starts to run out. I need to mention that a lot of Pokemon have had their moves switched up in this hack as well as their typing, and this is based off of the beta data from the OG demo. For example, Snubbull is a Psychic type and Sunflora is a Psychic Grass dual type. Super Gold takes the liberty of slightly tweaking some of the moves of Pokemon even if they're not included in the data of the beta. For example, Snubbull can learn Psywave naturally and it can also learn Psychic. There's a bit more flexibility in that aspect. I'm not the best at team building, so I just opted for a chunky normal type team which included a Licky Lord and a Snorlax that knew Belly Drum and Body Slam. In addition to movesets, the type table in the beta is different. Normal is super effective against Dark type and Water is super effective against Steel, for example. There are a lot more changes to the type table, but I'm not going to sit here and list them off. That would take forever. I'll just put it on screen so you can read it instead. Certain types have been buffed, like I would consider Bug to be buffed since it's stronger against more types like Poison, but the problem is that there aren't many good Pokemon that can capitalize on their buffs in a reasonable amount of time, and because of the aforementioned TM scarcity, it's basically meaningless in most cases, in my opinion. Like Pinsir has this really cool evolution called Tricules. It's a Bug Steel dual type, and that's sick. The only Bug type move it can learn is Mega Horn at 60. Level 60. None of my Pokemon hit level 60 until I was through most of the post-game content. So it functionally can't learn any Bug type moves outside of Fury Cutter through TM, which is a terrible move overall. Let me just sit and stack Swords Dance and spam Fury Cutter, I guess. I think part of the problem I have is that if I want to change up my team, I have zero way to do it in a reasonable amount of time, which is just a consequence of the hack adhering to the original Gen 2 experience. It's just kind of disappointing because I really enjoyed this new spin on Johto, but the progression was so slow that I don't think I was able to properly appreciate it. Eventually, I was just begging for it to be over. There was no place I could find to grind, and I don't think my Pokegear was working right. I believe you're supposed to be able to register trainers in it and stuff, I think, but that wasn't the case for me. The only person I was getting a call from was Bill when my PC box was full. Although looking through the guide, I'm not sure if this feature is actually implemented, and if it wasn't implemented, I definitely think it should have been if it was possible. The XP you would get from those trainer battles would have helped a lot, I think. The Poke community thread says that the XP curve had been adjusted. I don't know if I see the vision or know what that means entirely. It's insanely slow to level up. If there is a difference, I don't see it. The levels are overall higher than the original since you don't get the Kanto gym leaders to challenge. You only earn 8 badges in Super Gold, but you do have the opportunity to re-challenge the leaders once you beat the Elite Four. My Pokemon were mid-40s when I challenged Red at the 8th gym, but Lance's ace was level 61, and you can imagine how enjoyable it is to try to gain enough levels to safely challenge the Elite Four. At the speed it takes to complete a battle, just plain old wild Pokemon battles, it's just painful. All that aside, I really liked being able to explore the world of Nihon. I think that was my favorite part about this hack. I just loved experiencing the story, making my way through the gym challenge, and seeing all of the scrap Pokemon, and even just normal Pokemon with different sprites. I did have to say that like many times with hacks that have somewhat tedious and difficult gameplay features, I do tend to have a few more complaints. If there was some sort of built-in optional XP modifier, I think I might be able to recommend this. I can't say enough times how cool it is to have an entire Pokemon region built off of the information from a leaked beta version of a game from 1997. Unfortunately, for someone like me who's more used to the quality of life features from newer generations, that hack does fall kind of flat. I can appreciate it for what it is, but as something I would come back to play again, I don't think I would. There really isn't much to do outside of re-challenging the gym leaders after you beat the Elite Four. You can go to what's called the Southwest Islands once you become champion, but there's really not too much to do there. It's definitely a lot different than being able to go re-explore Kanto like you can in the final release of Gold and Silver. On the Southwest Islands, you can fight Bruno at some point. There's probably a reason why he's there, but to me it was just kind of random since I didn't really get the reference. There are more Pokemon to catch, and initially you're meant to travel to the island to go find a part for the ship you rode in on because it broke down, but once you fix it, that's about the extent of its purpose. I got a lot of playtime out of this hack, but I'm not sure it was a great use of my time. I really enjoyed being able to explore the project, but given the amount of time I had to spend repeatedly battling wild Pokemon in the same patches of grass, it really kind of killed it for me. I think if you're a huge fan of the old systems that Pokemon used to be built on, that this would probably be really enjoyable for you. There are a lot of Pokemon to collect, the pacing is similar in terms of XP and the progression through your adventure, and it isn't very handholdy in terms of guiding you where you need to go. If that's your thing, this is a great project for you to check out. But if you're more like me, I don't think I would recommend you go into this with the intent of finishing the hack and 100%ing it. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you made it to the end of the video. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to give this video a watch. If you found that you really liked my content, and B, it would be amazing if you could consider giving this video a like and subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. Your support means so much to me, and it also lets the algorithm know that folks are interested in my content. Okay, I think that's it for today. I hope you have an amazing day, and I can't wait to see you again next time. Okay, bye.